Please take a second to subscribe, then like and share afterwards. We can really use your support. Thank you. A measuring line will be stretched over Jerusalem, and the Lord will again comfort Zion and again choose Jerusalem. Zechariah 1:16-17. From what we've seen in part 1 in the return of Jerusalem, we began the mystery of the man and the measuring line. But who is this man who will fulfill the prophecy of our modern times? His name was Charles Warren. He was a British officer and a member of the Royal Engineers. He was sent to the land called Palestine on a mission to survey and map out Jerusalem, to measure the Holy City, as a man with the measuring line. His mission wasn't just to survey the city as it currently was, but to measure its ancient parameters, to locate its ancient walls and borders, and to uncover its foundations. To do that, he had to dig through centuries of ruins and earth to get down to the city's biblical foundations. However, the British weren't in control of the land at that time. The Ottoman Turks were, and they were suspicious of his activities. He was always being watched, so he had to tread lightly and often work in secret. This work would in fact usher in the new age of biblical archaeology. We need to remember that according to the Jubilee, which is the focus of returning to what was lost and must be restored, Jerusalem is the ancestral possession of the Jewish people, so it must be all measured out before the return. Not only the holy city, but the entire promised land, the land of Israel. Warren's measuring of Jerusalem ushered in the surveying of the entire land. It was a sign that there was about to be a transference of the land back to the original owner. It was now being prepared for the return. When did Warren measure Jerusalem? Incredibly, it was in 1867, the very same year that Twain came to bear witness. The two occurred in the same place and same time, without the two even knowing about each other or about its significance. Both happened to stay in the very same lodging place, in the same month, in the same week, and in the same few days. Both did not know about it, but they were fulfilling their part in the prophecy. They may have likely even passed each other in the lobby. Moving forward, every Sabbath day, from ancient times, the Jewish people gather in their synagogues, open up their scrolls, and read the ancient scriptures. Thus, on every Sabbath day, there is a specific portion of scripture appointed to be read. The portion is called the parasha. In ages past, for every week and every Sabbath day of history into modern times, the parasha were appointed. Could it be possible that some of these appointed words were appointed not only to be spoken on those days, but of and to those days, to speak of events that would take place in modern times? Jerusalem was the ultimate goal of Mark Twain's entire journey. The journey began in June 1867. In the summer months, he would travel the cities of Europe, then reach the Holy Land in mid-September. He would enter the gates of Jerusalem on September 23rd, the ultimate goal of his entire journey. On the 27th, after a short excursion into the desert, he would return to the Holy City for the culmination of his travels. The 28th would constitute his last full day and night in Jerusalem. The following day, the 29th, he would board his ship and begin his journey home to America. The 28th of September, 1867, fell on a Saturday. This is the Sabbath. And so, on the stranger's last full day in Jerusalem, and the last Sabbath of his journey in the land, there was actually an appointed scripture. It reads, The stranger that shall come from a far land shall say, when they see the plagues of that land, and the sicknesses which the Lord has laid on it, the whole land is brimstone, salt, and burning. It is not sown, nor does it bear, nor does any grass grow there. This very passage was appointed to be read in every synagogue in the world. On that day, they were chanting this passage about the stranger coming from a faraway land. And thus, the prophecy was being proclaimed at the very time and place where Twain was walking the streets of Jerusalem. Within the city, there was still a small remnant of Jewish people who were observing the Sabbath, reciting the words of the Scripture, just as that very stranger was walking in their midst. Is it possible that Twain actually heard the words of the prophecy that day, completely unaware of what was going on, and what was being said, and what it was all about? No, not likely. He was oblivious. Yet the glory of God, the mystery manifests regardless of anyone realizing it. None of the mysteries of these prophecies were ever planned by man. They just happened organically, yet God, in his mysterious ways, weaves these events into his plan to fulfill them. Yet these mysteries are far from over. They continue to manifest today. The dynamic will increase so that it will determine not only the course of such people as the stranger, but the course of world wars and the rise and fall of empires and superpowers, which we will continue to explore in this series. Mark Twain, who again was a skeptic of the Bible, would never know how he was drawn into the mystery and how he fulfilled the words of the prophecy, and in fact, he was always part of the mystery. Since ancient times, the scattered children of Israel would pray to God to have mercy on Jerusalem, to restore the city and bring them home, just as in the Al-Hamachia, a prayer of blessing that all Jews recite at a dinner table. For 2,000 years, it seemed as if God wasn't hearing their prayers, but the stranger would be a sign that their exile was about to end. God has heard their prayers. To answer how Twain was always part of the mystery, we need to look at Mark Twain's real name. At his birth, he was given the name Samuel. This is a Hebrew name. He was given the name that came from the land of Israel, and Samuel means God has heard. What's amazing is that God sent Twain to the land as a message that he has heard their prayers. He was about to fulfill his purposes for Jerusalem and the Promised Land. Their prayers for 2,000 years included a plea that God would have mercy and to be merciful to them. Twain's last name was not Twain. It was Clemens. This name holds a mystery and a message as well. In Hebrew, Clemens is rooted in the word merciful. God has indeed been merciful. God was indeed about to show his people his abundant mercy. According to the Jubilee, the connection between the land and its owner is restored, as we discussed back in part 1. Up until then, the original owner has no right concerning the land. He cannot even walk on it without the permission of the one now occupying it. But when the Jubilee comes, the owner can again walk on his land, farm it, build on it, and dwell on it. The barriers are removed. The owner's connection to it are restored and reaffirmed. What's interesting is when the Jewish people lost their homeland and their holy city in the 1st century, the Romans tried to erase every connection between the land of Israel and the people of Israel. They remade Jerusalem into a pagan city and called it Aelia Capitolina. And to further eradicate that connection, they renamed the land of Israel Palestina, meaning the land of the Philistines, the name of Israel's enemies. The erasing was so successful that for nearly 2,000 years the land would be simply known as Palestine. The Jews were even banned from setting foot into the holy city. The owner was cut off from the land. But when the Jubilee comes, the connection between the owner and the land is restored. What was once lost becomes regained. In the year of the Jubilee, the field shall return unto him of whom it was bought, even to him to whom the possession of the land did belong. Leviticus 27:24. For this to occur, the owner must relinquish his control so that the return could take place. But how would that happen? World history doesn't just give in to outsiders because the Bible said so. Nations don't just do that easily. And who did it belong to in 1867? Well, in 70 AD, the Romans destroyed all of Jerusalem, including the temple, as prophesied by Jesus. After driving the Jews out, they occupied the land until the empire was split in two. The Byzantines then occupied it. By the 7th century, the armies of the Muslim Caliph Umar occupied the land. From then on, with exception of the Crusader kingdom, it would be occupied by various Muslim rulers and warring factions until the Ottoman Empire, who was in control by 1867. So again, how would it be relinquished to the Jews again if it was under control by the Ottomans, especially for the fact that they are an Islamic empire? Well, don't forget, God was at work, and when He ordains something to take place, well, it's going to happen. The mystery of God's divine ordinances causes all things, all events, even the rise and fall of kingdoms, to move in the ordinance. So it must happen in one way or another. And in the case of bringing back His people to His promised land, He would do it in a very spectacular, biblical fashion, and most people don't even have a clue. We're going to reveal what the one cause was. It was an object. That object disappeared, which caused the Greek Orthodox and the Latin clergies to quarrel. The Russian government sided with the Orthodox clergy, while the Ottomans, France, Britain, and Sardinia sided with the Latin clergy. This conflict would lead to the Crimean War. The war would be a turning point for the Ottoman Empire. During this conflict, the empire would enter into massive loans with its European creditors, the first of several that would lead to a financial disaster and eventually bankruptcy. 2 years after the war, the Sultan enacted the Ottoman Land Code. All land now had to be registered. By registering meant that the land could then be taxed. It was a way to raise money. This opened the door for large-scale buying and selling of Ottoman land, including the Holy Land. But according to Ottoman law, no land could be sold to foreigners, those outside the empire. However, the registration of the land did not solve the empire's financial problems. The situation became so critical that it caused the government to do something unprecedented. 9 years after the first land code, the empire enacted a new law, a new Ottoman land code. The land could now be purchased by foreigners. The effect of this law was unnoticeable at first, but Jewish people began buying land in Palestine, at times through third parties that went undiscovered for quite some time. When authorities realized what was happening, they tried to stop it. They placed a ban on Jews buying land in Palestine, but by then it could not be stopped. The release of the land would continue nonetheless and would prepare the way for the return of the exiles. What was this object that went missing? It was the Star of Bethlehem inside the Church of the Nativity in the town of Bethlehem. One can then say that God used the Star of Bethlehem to bring the people back to Israel, just as he led the wise men to Bethlehem to find the newborn king. Now, here is the big connection. The stranger, Mark Twain, began his journey to Israel on June 8, 1867. The release of the land began on June 10, 1867. So of all the years and days of human history, the relinquishing of the land begins 2 days after the stranger's journey begins. So what exactly is a jubilee then? Isn't it only a period of 50 years? Yes, but it doesn't take just one jubilee to bring completion, but rather 7. There were many jubilees from the time of the scattering to modern times, but there were only 7 from the time that the Ottomans were given control of the Holy Land until the end of it in 1867. According to the law of jubilees, it does not only undo the last transaction of the land, but it undoes them all. From the Romans all the way through to the Ottomans, they all get undone. Therefore, we only need to count back 7 jubilees from 1867 to see if it is the time of the last transaction. That brings us backwards by 350 years. 50 jubilees times 7 gives us 350 years. That brings us to 1517. Did anything happen in that year? Yes, that was the year of the Battle of Redania, when the Ottoman prince Selim I defeated the Mamluk Sultanate, an Islamic empire centered in Cairo. It was the moment that the Ottomans took power in the region and sequentially took possession of the Holy Land. Therefore, 1867 was the 7th Jubilee, the year of completion, the year of the beginning of the end. It would mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. The first Jubilee of restoration, the Jubilee of seeds, of sowing, of planting, and setting in motion of ancient purposes. Soon, the entire world would see its fruition. Next, in part 3 of the Return of Israel, we will explore so much more as the people return from exile and the nation becomes re-established, the details of which will blow your mind. Here on Prophecies Uncovered.